Good afternoon once again. We apologize for the hiccups in the setup. My name once again is Samuel Kwesi Nkansah. I am a senior lecturer in the Department of English, Linguistic Papers. I'm presenting on the topic, the return to the roots, Hiplife music as a confluence. I'll follow this order in the presentation. Look at my motivation, background, music and post-49, post-45, music and literature, a brief statement on hip-hop. We'll come to Hiplife in Ghana. We'll discuss the seeming dichotomy between the Hiplife and hip-hop. And then we'll settle on the confluence at the point of the meeting point of the two. Then we'll examine implications, literary implications, and the conference implications. My motivation, first one, is built on the general belief that the future of every nation is embedded in its youth. Obviously, the older generation itself grips and set the teeth of the youth on edge. A vibrant youth, therefore, seeks a better future for itself, since if one fails to comment on how one's head is shaped, one ends up having a bad shape. This is a mixture of Akan proverb and also the biblical quotation from the book of Isaiah. The second motivation also comes from my experience with interviewees I interacted with during my PhD research. The first encounter was with the popular Ghanaian highlife artist, Jedubile Ambule. The interaction with him revealed that Hiplife, as we see in Ghana, and the hip-hop, as we talk of as an American genre, really emanated from Africa and were transported to the US, Caribbean, and other places. And therefore, its return in the Hiplife form is just a complete, the completion of the cycle. So therefore, hip-hop, Hiplife, as we see today, is a kind of cyclical phenomenon in nature. The second one is also an interaction I had with Ejeko Nimo, also a traditional highlife artist, a scholar with the University of Science and Technology. He's noted for composing traditional highlife songs. And the interview with him also revealed that it has been a pattern with Africans that we use the music to communicate. And in doing that, we either do the narrative approach or we do the recitation, which defines hip-hop and Hiplife. It's obvious that literature of any time is inevitably bound up with time, spontaneously shaped by world events and shaping how we understand them. Events of times have continued to provide subject for discussions, and literature has drawn its subject matter from the enormous changes the world has undergone, which includes the historic international realignment, the reconfiguration of local and global economies, technological development and demographic shifts, revolutions in how information is communicated between individuals and among nations. With those, we can mention how history has influenced human life. We can mention Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities. We can mention the activities of Cromwell in Britain and all that. And it's obvious then that music as a medium of communication has been a means of communicating ideas and intent. And therefore, socially sensitive, articulate men and women utilize specific music genres of their time to air their views. I'm particularly zooming in on the post-45. By post-45, I'm talking of the Second World War. And we're looking at how music emerged and changed the course of discussions and social life after the Second World War. Literature, as we know, as a social product seen from historical perspectives, concerns itself with the means of literary production, distribution, and exchange in particular society. It interests us to share the view of one scholar who says that between 1945 and 1950, youth changed from taking for granted and largely acknowledged transitional stage between childhood and adulthood to a culture category marked by particular stylistic trends, tastes in music, and accompanying patterns of consumption, instrumental in the redefinition of youth, what the development of the post-Second World War youth market. By thus, we're saying that after the Second World War, the youth assumed a center stage in activities of life. Their desires changed. Those who were taken for granted in planning took a center stage because they realized that they had to take life into their own hands. And by this, they employed several means in achieving that. One of the dominant means that they employed is the music. And between 1945 and the 1970s, we saw the emerging of various musical genres. And all these were masterminded by the youth who felt that the music provided an avenue for them to also play active role in the economies of life, in social activities of life, in trade and everything. So we talk of rock and roll. I know the older ones among us know what we mean by rock and roll. They dance to it, punk and then punk roll. Then the more recent one, relatively recent, Rasta and the Rasta culture, and the African American rap or the hip hop. I am familiar with the Rasta and the Rasta culture, but then we'll get there. These compositions or these musical genres, in a way, did not operate in isolation. They augmented other activities taking place, happening around the world, and gave impetus to such activities. One of it is the civil rights movement that rocked the United States of America in the 1960s. We can talk about the anti-Vietnam War movement. We can talk of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We can talk of Black Power movement, etc. All these received momentous radical support from Black music in the 1960s. A particular example is James Brown's Say It Loud, and I'm Black and Proud. Aretha Franklin's Respect. These echoed the emotional sentiment of the Black Power movement with emphasis on Black pride. Berlin observed that with Black pride, there was an increasing feeling that African Americans should support and protect their own culture. And obviously, this came out loud through the music compositions. A good one we cannot forget is reggae. And here I've titled music and literature because it's not just music you're looking at. We shall also zoom into the role of poetry and the relationship that it's established with reggae. We know Rasta Bob Marley, Robert Nesta Marley, Peter Tosh, and my favorite, Lucky Dube. The kind of airwaves, the kind of wind that they cause to blow across Africa and the world. We know Bob Marley occupies a center stage in the reggae culture, and he is respected and worshipped by the reggae Rastafarians, all because he used music to shape the course of life of the youth and the world. So reggae introduced both a distinct musical style and a political culture that trumpeted the significance of Africa as a spiritual homeland for all Africans, especially African diasporic populations around the world. Another critical character that played a role in the reggae, during the reggae period, is Langston Kwesi Johnson, a poet. For him, he did two things. He wrote and also composed songs. And his compositions were preoccupied with organizing workshops, working with other poets and musicians to address issues of racial equality and social injustice. His kind of poetry, which has some specific cultural alliance with Jamaican patois dialect, reggae backbeat, but precursor to spoken word as we see today. In all this, I'm trying to point out the fact that music has been at the center stage and the dominant tool that the youth of generations have used to trumpet their concerns. So commenting on why Johnson, for instance, started to write poetry, he said, the answer is that my motivation sprang from a visceral need to creativity or to creatively articulate the experiences of the Black youth of my generation coming of age in a racist society. Not long ago, we came to terms with hip hop, which traces its origin to Bronx district of New York during the 1970s. Now, this emerged because of the urban renewal program and economic recession. So we had some particular characters, we call them DJs, who decided to hit the streets and use the common knowledge of the youth to change things. So he formed the Zulu Nation, and if you talk of Zulu, it brings to mind the South African kinship system, and they are trained in fighting their enemies. So he labeled or branded his group the Zulu Nation, and in an effort to redirect the frustrations of the youth of the South Bronx from gang fighting rather into music, dance, and graffiti. In reaction to the socioeconomic conditions of the youth in Bronx, rap then became an important means of addressing and negotiating their plight. This medium of music was radically or readily handy as the youth did not need to know how to play musical instruments to be able to compose music. Now, for the rap, the practice was that compositions were rendered over existing musical rhythms. So they didn't need to go to the studio to compose, as we had our high life artists composing. That's what gave birth to or gave way to the proliferation of rap music. And as we speak in Ghana, almost everybody can rap in any corner. Good. Now, rap, hip hop, just like Hiplife in Ghana, was met with fierce opposition by the status quo. By status quo, I'm referring to those who thought that these are gangsters, these are criminals, these are people who don't own anything in society. They are noted for causing mayhem. They met them and tried to stop them. But then, as the Bible indicates, that those who rose against Jesus Christ after his exit could not survive. And they said that, why don't you let them operate? If it's from God, it will stay. If not from God, it also fall apart. Rap faced that opposition, but it survived. Rap music then became the proper mainstream culture in the mid 1980s, and one of the most commercially successful style in the late 20th century and early 21st century. We can talk of the Tupac, we can talk of Big Boss and all of them. Now, they did not just get into the music, but they also came up with fashion, style, way of living. We could see their baggy shirt and baggy trousers and kind of necklaces all around their neck and so on. So music at the time did not just function at that artistic level, but also became a commercial activity. And if we come to Ghana, we have people who also ventured into Hiplife, and they have established themselves as fashion icons. We can talk of Reggie Rockstone, we can talk of Nana Kwame and all that together. It was started as being associated with incidents of youth crime, as I mentioned earlier, violence, and a misogynistic elements, so that any other representation of music and its social significance is largely prevented from entering mainstream public perception. Per this view, attempts were then made to push off rap from the mainstream music. The view I am trying to put forward is that it has been widely held that Hiplife emerged from hip hop. And as I indicated earlier from my research, the practice of singing, recitation over musical compositions, creativity, is not a new thing. But then the books have it that the code of Hiplife rap in its global spread caught up with Ghana. And we would attribute this one to the return of Reggie Rockstone to Ghana in the late 1980s. When Reggie Rockstone returned to Ghana, his first composition, Chukucha, was believed to have sparked the new genre that we're talking about. But then before Reggie Rockstone, we are aware that July-Aug had composed a number of songs using the same approach. I don't know, but we can sing a song like "Everybody's Not Sure Where Rajo Aba." You want to sing it? Yeah. So let me mention that there had been a serious problem with the ownership of Hiplife in Ghana. People have attributed it to Reggie Rockstone, and July-Aug is also claiming it. But according to Ejakonimo, that's Daniel Amponsah, Dr. Daniel Amponsah, he says that none of the two can claim ownership to that brand of music because it has been with us since time immemorial. But then we can also say that with the modern nature of it, we can have kind of association with Reggie Rockstone, and we can also share some with July-Aug. In fact, July-Aug mentioned to me that the Jama song that we used to sing when we were in school, whenever we had athletics, competition, all those things, were all forms of Hiplife. The occupational songs the Fisher folks sang in the course of pulling the nets or pulling the canoe up, they were all forms of Hiplife and so on. And that gave me the thinking that we can examine the cyclical nature of it. So, I was saying that hip-hop has witnessed an overwhelming patronage among Ghanaian youth as a medium of expression for the youth of Ghana in articulating their concerns, especially of cultural, social, political, and economic concerns. So we have mentioned Reggie Rockstone's return. Let's go particular to this. I mentioned earlier that the American hip-hop was to address economic concerns. And in Ghana too, we have the same thing. So per theme, per subject, they share a kind of commonality there. If we talk of the song titled Sentinel Ajibebia, it's obvious of the corruption in the country. If we talk of, in fact, if we isolate the musician, Sydney, Oberma Sydney, all his compositions are meant to address political issues in the country. We can also talk of A+. We can talk of Sarkodie, right? India compositions, they have others that also veer off. But then if we are looking at the medium of addressing, showing concern of the issues concerning the youth in the country, these are artists who really use their music to do that. Now, the seeming dichotomy that the books have brought up is that the Western music is known to be different from African music in terms of one, rhythm, harmony, melody, form. But even in this, those of us who are very familiar with hip hop and the rest realize that sometimes you have some undercurrent of African tunes in the Western hip hop. Instrumentation, we have a resemblance with African culture. Now, for language, we can identify the distinctive elements because if you go to America, for instance, it's monolingual. But in its monolingual context, the hip-hop artists who are not well educated in a way try to create a kind of dialect unique to their age, their environment, and then they sing in that. So if we listen to the Tupac and all that, they do not sing the songs in the high-flown, impeccable English as we teach in our lecture rooms. All values are the same, and they're trying to trumpet that. However, Nkansah demonstrates that African music in itself shares communal life. In fact, I've titled this section Seeming Dichotomy because for me, it's not a dichotomy. It's not a dichotomy because the common community life that Africans share, the same thing applies to the Bronx life because all the hip-hop artists and their community identify themselves as one people with one destiny. So they don't see that. Sharing common habits, we have it there. That's why the fashions and all that came into being. Corporate living, common institutions, common local traditions, common beliefs. What the common belief? The common belief is that live and let us also live. These are the issues that the youth would always present. So whether it is in the US or in Ghana, the common belief is that live and let us live. The value is share, let us share equally. And then there's that strong social cohesion. Social cohesion in the sense that all hip-life artists see themselves as brothers. My interview with Obo, he mentioned that they have decided that they'll have three strands of the hip life in Ghana. One, those who compose in the Akan language tree so that they can protect, defend, and then, protect the values of the Akan people. Then we have those who also do the code mixing, code switching so that they can communicate to the wider society about broader issues. And then we have those who will sing in the English. And of those who sing in the English, we have just about two of them. Talk of Samini and sometimes Reggie Rostone. They sing in the English. So these two, that's the indigents, those who sing in the local languages, try to protect their Akan values. Those who sing the code mixing, code switching, try to project the bigger Ghanaian social issues. And that creates the cohesion we're talking of. Now, the point of confluence. By confluence, I'm talking of the mergence, the oneness, the togetherness. That, the songs are composed in the US, others are composed here in Ghana. And in fact, my study revealed that the wind caught up with almost every part of the world. So if you go to any part of the world, you have a variant of hip hop, a variant of hip life. But then we want to draw the link with hip life and hip hop to the origin. So originality. Old African patterns of singing and still in use in churches, festivals, as companies, etc., demonstrates the style, the artistic style of hip life and hip hop. If we're Methodists, you know of what you call the binyom by the Christ Little Band. Uzani Jesus, so Uzani Jesus, they will stop and they do the recitation for a while and they continue. That is it. And this is not a modern day thing. If Methodist Church was established in this country in the 18th century, the Hiplife was nowhere. But then that was how the song was. If you go to churches like African Faith Tabernacle, if you go to Top Apostles, that's how they sing. So therefore, Hiplife, the style of Hiplife, the style of hip hop, is not so new to Ghana. And therefore, if the Americans are using it, we are saying that it's a kind of an importation from Africa to the US and then brought back to us. I can mention ASAFO companies. There's a student I'm supervising who is working on a pop festival. And a pop festival, he tells me that there are musical compositions where the indigenes of the land sing, and in the course of singing, recite their frustrations about the system. And that is through the same pattern. Then Kay says that the method of the rap singers or hip-hop artists can be traced to Africa, where bad singers, we know bad, those who are in the palaces and sing the praises of the kings and the chiefs and all that. This is the approach they use. And kinship has been with us since time immemorial. Musical genres of Africa, the African descent, draw on the characteristic flavor and stylistic identity of Africa. As I indicated, it's unfortunate I couldn't play some of the songs here. Maybe we'll have time to listen to them. I just want to whet your appetites, and from here, you go and listen to them and you can draw these things. The artistic compositions, talking of the use of imagery, these are localized imagery. If you come to the Hiplife artists, they try to localize the imagery by using images, symbolisms, metaphors that are so much identified with African life, with Ghanaian life. If you go to the US, it's the same thing they do. The interesting thing is that in hip hop, we don't see the bigger American picture there, but we see the smaller Bronx picture in the hip hop, because it's about them. And they are trying to speak to the bigger American community to listen to them. So they package their concerns in that unique imagery to them. The subject of discussion or of projection in both Hiplife and hip hop is about youth protestation. The youth employ this to protest. As I mentioned, if you listen to Ajigong, if you listen to Senyajo, these are all songs of protestation, just like we saw with the Tupacs and the rest protesting. Economic hardships. Not long ago, we saw on the social media where some youths have rejected some donations presented by some politicians because they think, let us get jobs to do, and by that we can fend for ourselves. So the economic hardship is the main issue, one of the issues they look at, unemployment they look at. In Ghana, we talk of social discrimination, but in the US, we have both social discrimination and then racial discrimination. What are the literary implications? The literary implications are that we need to give academic, scholarly attention to these compositions. In fact, let me skip to the next slide. We are talking of youth empowerment as an aspect of the theme of this colloquium. And if youth empowerment is an issue we are looking at, then I'm proposing that we should have a way of legitimizing the youthful creativity. And by that, we can create a window for them to give meaning to the means of venting out their anger so that we can appreciate them. Don't forget that when they started, others rose against them. And as I speak to now, nobody seems to have given that much backing to them. So if academics will delve into the musical compositions of the youth and give legitimize it, then of course, we'll be empowering them. 2, this paper or this presentation seeks to tie in with the view that we are all trying to secure the African family. One soul, one health, one world. Now, this can be done if we join the two sides of the coin by identifying the connecting elements that define our common R. And that's what I've tried to do by looking at the confluence between the hip hop music and the hip life music to say that we are one, except that we are moving in circles. We started somewhere, we've come back, and others will go. So our brothers and sisters in the diaspora are not very different from us. They are just part of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. He's given us a brilliant discourse on youth, music, development, and history. Very articulate. Thanks a lot. I think before we get the next speaker, we'll give room for a question or a comment or two. Thank you. Yes.
That's considering the music that most of them, those who belong to the age of 50s and better, we always say that the type of music that we have now as a movie is always about noisy. How do you connect and let me talking about the African family or the African communal system? The African communal system, the living and speaking that we connect all the livings. So how do we reconcile the parents where people in that full of noise and it has no meaning?
Thank you. Samuel, please can you give us a brief answer to that?
Thank you for the consent. It's something that's great. When a black forward is Sons of the Ten, we sought to communicate that many who were linked died because society was not really accepting. But it's a normal thing with every movement. We started with the post-45, we started with the punk, for example. When it came to others, when it came to even reggae. Many of those who saw reggae as a musical genre, some people of the second degree. So any form of music creativity will definitely be met with kind of position. But what is exciting to me is the message and the relevance of it to the society. In the 2008 elections in this country, we saw Nana Hiplife as a candidate then, parading about 30 Hiplife artists at Cape Stadium to sing for the essence. The 2012 elections, we are told that they went to Sydney to get the song Sentinel and Judea and all that, for the essence. So, obviously, many of those who will try to resist before that not the taste. therefore, to pregnant stage, I don't expect him to dance to Hiplife. But if he does, then it's because it's a literary person. For now, the Russell's and the rest are in their 50s. So the 50s, they still embrace it. The beautiful thing is that it is still undergoing transformation. When it started, it was heavily misogynistic. Today, these elements are winning from it. Right? So yes, it's going transformation. Those who seem to speak against it are not coming to home with it. Right? But the question of linking it to the past, for me, that was a good thing. It is. Because what is it about? It's about social values. It's about sanitizing society. It's about linking us to the past. I'm a song by the Bradford, the Yin and Apaye, right? The Yin Apaye. That is a good example of that. So for me, it meets the general and social need of helping to sanitize and shaping society. I don't know if I answered the question.
The older generation does not understand the younger generation.
But I think they do.
Okay,
As I
thank you.
indicated, if the second dates are